All right, welcome back to the show. So I am super excited today to be sitting down with my guest, Nick Hutchinson. Nick is the founder of Book Thinkers, a seven-figure marketing agency. And in just over 7 years, Nick has built a platform to connect over 1 million people to some of the best and most inspiring books out there to help us improve our businesses, our lives, and ourselves. And Nick is also the host of his own podcast, the Book Thinkers podcast, and he has hosted some amazing guests on there, the likes of Grant Cardone and Alex Hormozy. So those are some big names there. So hope I can live up to that, even to a small percentage or a small degree. But in any case, so Nick, I'm excited to be sitting down here and talking with you today. Obviously, what we're going to be talking about is how we're going to be learning from reading books, why it's important to read books, and also for any authors out there who want to, use book marketing to promote themselves and their brands. We'll definitely be sharing some tips there. So, Nick, without further ado, I want to welcome you to the show.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. And can I kick off by sharing a secret with you and and your audience?
Absolutely.
All right. So I was not much of a reader growing up at all. So, the introduction sounds amazing, but I just want to make sure anybody in your audience that's like, oh, I don't even read personal development books. Like maybe I should tune out for this episode. No, stick around because just like you, I was not much of a reader growing up. But for everybody that is a fan of personal development books and maybe some of the names that you mentioned, Hormozy and Cardone, like, yeah, buckle up because it's going to be a fun conversation. And yeah, listen, my journey started, I was more of the athlete growing up, not much of the academic. And that kind of continued through my college experience. It wasn't until I was going into my senior year of college that I picked up my first books. So, I mean, I really went 20 years of my life thinking that reading was nerdy and that reading wasn't cool and that I never needed to read to be successful. I could just watch YouTube videos or online courses, but obviously here I am a number of years later with a completely different perspective. These books have changed every aspect of my life and I owe, man, just about everything to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very relatable story that you have. And I think a lot of people, especially the ones who are kind of like in business for themselves, entrepreneur types, didn't necessarily all grow up as readers, right? We kind of grew up, want to do our own things, and maybe didn't really like doing the book reports in school. So I guess my question is, where do you think that, I guess not fear of books, but the dislike of reading books come from? And do you think it's just, a bad experience from kind of what we had to go through as kids in school?
Yeah, I know in my experience, it came from a lot of the insecurities that I had in English related classes. So classes that I had to get up and present in front of the room. I had a lot of social anxiety. And so as a result, I would stutter in front of the class or I'd misspeak or I'd get really awkward or have long periods of silence. And then as a result, people laugh and you sort of get made fun of. And so I would naturally shy away from those experiences. I mean, I have memories, in I don't know what age we are, but late grade school, maybe early high school, where you're reading in a circle around a class, maybe a little bit earlier than high school. And I'd like count ahead how many people I'd have, and then I'd kind of had the number of paragraphs and I'd practice it a bunch of times and I'd mess up and it drove a lot of insecurity. And so I think from there, I just naturally tried to avoid presenting in front of people or any of those classes like history or English or a foreign language where there was a lot of reading involved. So yeah, I use Spark Notes and all of those other platforms to avoid my summer reading book projects and things like that. And that kind of leads into a bigger conversation about the traditional education system in the United States. I think we're taught to avoid failure. And as you know, as a small business owner, entrepreneur type, failure is where you learn the most. And so I had nobody telling me, hey, Nick, it's okay if you get up in front of the class and fail because through repetition, constantly receiving constructive feedback, not laughter, but constructive feedback, you'll get better. And eventually you'll be able to communicate effectively. You'll be able to speak for a few sentences in a row without using the words, but, so, or losing track of what you were trying to say. But you have to embrace the discomfort first. Nobody told me that. So I think I was taught growing up that you should avoid failure. You'll be penalized if you fail. And that just created a really twisted understanding of what it meant to read and learn and educate yourself, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's really unfortunate because I think the best way to learn is through failing, right? If you don't try it first, then how do you know, what are the points to correct essentially? So it is important that, you know, we kind of embrace failure in that sense. So as far as, you know, just reading goes as compared to some of the other educational tools that are out there that you mentioned, like YouTube videos and, you know, maybe courses, you know, what's the difference there, right? What's the benefit in really reading versus just watching a YouTube video? Because, you know, people can do that these days, and there are success stories coming out of that.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying this. Any form of learning and education is better than just something that's entertaining, right? So if you're watching a course or you're watching a YouTube video that's constructive and motivational and inspiring, and you learn from that, that's amazing. My understanding of those platforms shifted a little bit when I read a book called The Art of Learning by Joshua Waitzkin. Joshua Waitzkin was a chess prodigy, world champion, and then he actually went into the world of mixed martial arts and became a world champion over there as well, many, many, many times. And he gives a lot of credit to what he calls long form learning. So when you read a book summary, you're just kind of breezing through the information. You'll get inspired. Maybe you'll take a little bit of action, but you don't have a true understanding of that information. Or when you watch a quick YouTube video or something like that. When you go through an entire book and you read and reflect and meditate on the information, you read all the miscellaneous case studies in the book. And, you know, the author does a great job at building up, you know, giving you all of the reference material and then telling you what he needs to tell you and then telling you why it's important. All of that time you spend with the information, it can become part of your subconscious. You can truly understand it. That repetition, you know, all those different examples from different perspectives, that repetition leads to retention. And that retention gives you the ability to truly live the information. So when Joshua Waitzkin would study chess strategy or martial arts strategy, when presented with an opportunity to take action in a chess match or in a mixed martial arts match, it was his subconscious acting on his behalf because he knew the information so well that he could automatically go through those scenarios with success, whereas other people would have to stop and think. And it's the people that read book summaries, I think, or the people that watch YouTube videos that have to stop and think before they take action. And sometimes those couple of seconds, they matter in business, they matter in personal development situations. And that's just, I think it's why I'm a fan of reading. I'll throw one more reason out there too, because sometimes I do read fiction. And we live in a world today that's full of instant gratification. Like we don't even give a TikTok or Instagram Reels video more than 1 second before we know whether or not it's going to be a good fit for us. But reading a book, sitting down and reading a paper book, now you're exercising your deep work muscles, your ability to sit down and focus for extended periods of time. And that's unfortunately, just like the failure in education thing, it's a differentiating skill set. Like if I ever had to go back and interview for a traditional job again, like Book Thinkers imploded, or I just wanted to go back into the workforce. Hey, Nick, what are your best skill sets? I can sit down and focus for hours without distraction and get a lot of really good work done. And that skill set I've developed by sitting down, sort of nose in a paper book and reading for extended periods of time. And that skill set's transferable to other areas of my life.
Yep, absolutely. I think there's so many benefits to reading, right? And I love that you pointed that out, that it really helps you focus because if you really want to get the most out of what you're reading, then you have to focus and you have to really force yourself to, you know, immerse in the information that you're actually taking in versus having all these different, I guess, senses coming at you at the same time, right? With audio and video. With books, it's just you're reading and everything else kind of, you need to be able to tune that out. So as far as what you mentioned earlier on about, you know, reading and it being able to basically train your subconscious mind to act a certain way, I think that's so important because um you know, I think it's just an easier way to live, if that makes sense. Because if you're constantly using your consciousness to try to pull out information, that you're actually giving yourself a lot of work that you don't necessarily need to do in
Right.
order to act a certain way. So I think, you know, what you talked about there with reading books is you're able to kind of overload your mind So that way you're essentially reprogramming yourself to think a certain way or to act on the information that is being presented to you through the books that you're reading.
Yeah, 2000%. So our brains have this filtering mechanism called the RAS, the reticular activating system. And it's the reason why somebody says yellow car and you go outside and you see a yellow car and you're like, whoa, did I just create that? Well, you did sort of, because you're filtering for it. So one of the things that I like to do every time I read a book is I like to set an intention for each book. And the intention follows the SMART goal framework. So it's specific, measurable, actionable, and attainable. It's written down and relevant to my life, and it's time bound. So when I pick up a book to read it, I'll just pick one up, From Grassroots to Greatness. I won't just read this book blindly. I'll read with intention. I'll set a goal like find and implement at least 2 strategies to improve my community by the end of next week. And I'll know whether or not I've achieved that. But each and every time I read that intention, most of the time I'll write it on the inside cover of the book. I'll now filter for that information as I'm reading. Then as you're reading, you can pull that information out because you're filtering for it, and you're much more likely to take action because it's related to your intention. And so to kind of tie it back to the programming, I've programmed myself to filter for information within books like that, but that can also work through repetition by implementing something into your life. So it reminded me of gratitude. When I first started to read about gratitude, I think the first book that made it really relevant to me was Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. And he basically said that out of all these world performers, a huge number of them practice gratitude or mindfulness on a daily basis. So I started to journal for 3 things that I was grateful for every single day. And I knew that I would have to come up with 3 things the following day. So I just started filtering for opportunities to be grateful. And then when a Lamborghini would zip by on the highway, I wouldn't go, oh, you know what? I wish I had that Lamborghini. I'd go, how grateful am I to have a car? So many people don't have a car. This is so cool. And I just started naturally filtering from a feeling of I wish to like I have. And I needed all of that case study information about why gratitude was important for my subconscious to truly understand it. And then to get into that rhythm of writing things down on a daily basis, that repetition, for it to become an automated action. Now, every single day, I wake up and I notice things I'm grateful for, like you for having me on this show. And it's, yeah, I mean, a YouTube video can certainly do that for you, but it's far more likely to happen if you take it offline and read a book, understand all of the science, and then start to write things down every day in that example.
Yep, absolutely. You're really immersing yourself in the information being presented. And I think that's the difference between it being, just kind of conscious information that you have to pull out, using your almost like your willpower versus, something that's actually a part of you. And that's really, I think, the goal of any personal development or anything that you're trying to do, even learning a skill set, is you want it to become part of who you are, not just something that you can kind of pull out of your toolbox at will, if that makes sense. Even though, it's good if you can still do that as well. So as far as the strategies, right, you mentioned setting an intention before even going into reading the book. How should we approach that, right? So what are some other strategies that are out there that you think are helpful as far as, reading books and getting the most out of them? Because we all know the people that are out there who maybe read 500,000 books, but they never improve, and they just, filter through books, but they're never getting that information from the books.
One of my all-time favorite tips is actually to set up a weekly accountability group. And what I mean by that, well, actually, let me tell the story of how I started my first accountability group. So I was reading a book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy with one of my friends. And in that book, Darren recommends setting up some type of weekly accountability group and activity tracker. So I did that with a couple of my friends, and we would meet every Friday for an hour, and we would talk about what we had learned that week, what we wanted to implement. And then the following week, we would do a little recap session, and I'd say, hey, Kobe, last week you told me you were going to read 10 pages Monday through Friday. How'd you do? And we had this little activity tracker. And you'd say, oh, well, I got it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I failed Thursday, Friday. And we'd get into a conversation. Well, why do you think you failed? What could you do this week to set yourself up for success? And that accountability mattered a lot because it's kind of like that gym analogy. yeah, you wake up, you want to snooze your alarm, but if somebody else is waiting at the gym for you, you're far more likely to get up and go. And so, with everything that we were reading and looking to implement, we had accountability partners holding us accountable to taking that action, and they would give us a hard time if we decided not to take action. I mean, we built this group where it was kind of cutthroat. Like, if you just show up and go through the motions, you're going to get kicked out, and we'll find somebody else who's a little bit more motivated to take your place. So if you say, like, if you state your intentions to the world and to our group that you're going to take action, you better take action. And so I think sometimes when I talk about accountability, people are like, well, I'm the most motivated person in my friend group. I don't really have anybody around me that would be interested in something like this. My friends don't talk about that stuff. And I challenge everybody, remind everybody first, I suppose, that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with, that famous Jim Rohn quote. And so instead of trying to find a new friend group, like, rise together. You might be able to reach out to a friend and say, hey, remember you said you were going to run a marathon last year? Did that ever happen? No? Well, maybe I could hold you accountable to making it happen this year. Or, hey, remember that book that I gave you 6 months ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Did you ever dive into that? No, I haven't gotten around to it yet. Well, I'm starting this little accountability group. Maybe I could hold you accountable to reading a few pages a week and we could talk about it on the call. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Or if you don't have anybody in your network like that, you can always get in the comment section of your favorite influencer, maybe Alex Hormozy. He just put out a new book, $100 Million Leads. And you could DM a few people and say, hey, I see that you just bought a copy of the book as well. I just bought one. Would you want to jump on a call once a week and kind of chat about some of the concepts? I'm looking to build a more motivated friend group. And if you sent 20 DMs, you'd probably get a couple of people that would say yes. So find people to support you. I mean, life is tough enough by yourself. It gets a little bit easier if you have other people in your corner rooting for you every day.
Yep. And just one last thing on tips to get better at, or get better at reading or getting more out of the books that you're reading, right? What do you think is a good kind of goal to set, right? If somebody has never read a book before, or, well, I guess that's if somebody's not in the habit of reading, right, and they want to start reading more and learning more, what is a goal, a good goal to set in the beginning? Is it 10 pages a day? Is it a time-based goal, or is it maybe like a book a month? What's a good kind of tracker of activity that you should be doing on a daily basis?
The following math is kind of mind blowing. Actually, let me give you an example first. I like to say to people, oh, you're not much of a reader or you can't get into a reading habit. Let me ask you a question. If I gave you $10,000 to read a book by the end of next week, do you think you could do it? And those same people go, well, I could read 5, So, okay, you value the money, but you don't value the book without the money. So let's talk about how to create a little bit more value for the book. What if this book could solve a problem that you've been facing on a daily basis? Remove all of that pain for $20 in a few hours of your time. Or what's the difference between where you are right now and where you want to be in a year? What major skill gaps are there? What if you could read a book to help eliminate that skill gap and get closer to where you could truly be? So it's kind of about picking the right book. Once you're motivated enough to actually start reading, I love to recommend the following schedule. Replace 15 minutes of your morning Instagram or TikTok scrolling with reading a book. Not the whole thing, just 15 minutes of your morning TikTok or Instagram scrolling. And we all watch football or we all watch Netflix or HBO or whatever the case is before we go to bed. Just replace the first 15 minutes with reading a good book. So that's 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. That's 2.5 hours per week of reading if you could just do 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. For a beginning reader, 15 minutes might be about 10 pages, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on the book that you pick. So that's 20 pages a day. That's 100 pages a week. And most of these books are about 200 pages these days. So that's literally a book every 2 weeks. That's 26 books in the next 12 months that you could read just by replacing a low impact activity that's essentially meaningless to your future self, like Netflix or Instagram, with something that's higher impact and serves your future self, a good personal development book that's directly tied to solving pain that you experience on a daily basis. And so that's kind of like the workshop and the math that I like to go through with people, because 15 minutes twice a day is 26 books. Pretty mind blowing that way.
No, absolutely. I don't think people understand what that will be able to do for them over the course of a year or 2 years, or really extrapolate those numbers. And, you talked about the compound effect, right? The more you do it for a longer period of time, the more you're going to see the results start to compound. So it doesn't take much, right? Just 15 minutes and you're replacing something, like you said, not even the whole thing, because some people spend, hours on TV and Instagram, just 15 minutes. And you'll begin to see the results. And really, I think when people start seeing results, no matter how small, that's when they get more motivation to, do more and put more effort into this. So as far as the different types of books that are out there, right? I think this is another important point, or another important question, is the filtering of books. Do you have a way to filter books, as far as, knowing which ones are good and knowing which ones are maybe not as good, and spending your time on the ones that you're really going to get the most return of your time on?
Sure. So let's say you're trying to solve a specific problem in your life. Let's say that every time you go to negotiate something, whether it's a new car or something with your spouse, something in your business situation, you're always on the losing end of that negotiation. So you say, okay, that's a pain that I experience on a weekly basis in my relationships and my job. And I want to find a good book that can help me improve my negotiation skills and remove that issue so that I stop losing on a weekly basis. Maybe that's your problem. What I would do first is I would go to some mentors. If you have anybody, a boss, a friend, somebody that you want to be like, that knows you, knows your reading style, and maybe has already overcome the same problem that you're trying to solve. Like when you think, who's a good negotiator? This person comes to mind. Reach out to them. Tell them a little bit about the problem that you're experiencing, and ask them, hey, I know you're a reader. Have you read any good books on this subject? Typically, people that make personalized recommendations and have a good understanding of your life experience, that's always going to be the most accurate fit for you. Again, not everybody has that kind of opportunity to reach out to somebody. So I would go to something like Amazon and I would start typing in books on negotiation. And typically, the books with more reviews are going to be better, because better books get read by more people. They have a natural word of mouth viral potential built into them because they're good books. And an author can only do so much fake advertising behind the scenes. Once you get into the Amazon review section, I love removing 5-star reviews and removing 1-star reviews. Typically, those are written with emotion, and we want to get into the logic center of the brain. So people who write, and remove the 2s as well, people who write 3 and 4-star reviews, those are people who are writing from a place of logic. They're going to say, here's the issue that I had. Here's what I was expecting the book to do for me. But here's the result. Didn't meet my full expectations because of X, Y, and Z reason, but still a pretty good book overall. And I like to filter through those, read through them, and see if people are talking about the same problem that I'm looking to solve. There are a lot of other ways to filter through books, but at the risk of being too long-winded, I'll just kind of leave it there. I think those are some good places to start.
I like that. I like that advice, right? I like what you said about getting a personalized recommendation, because I have heard a lot of stories, or people out there who, they maybe picked up a really popular book that is really kind of accepted by the general public. Like, Think and Grow Rich is one that actually comes up a lot. Mostly I think it's because it's been a while since it was written. A lot of people pick that book up and they don't necessarily relate with it, or get it, or maybe they go a couple pages in, or maybe halfway through the book, and they don't like it anymore because it's just too boring for them. But it's a great book, right? The information in there is great, but maybe for that individual, they just need something a little bit more modern, a little bit more, maybe scientific, if you know what I'm talking about, right? As far as the science behind the principles being taught there. So you got to find a book that kind of relates to your style of thinking, and what works best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, once you find that book, make sure you set an intention. Because if every person that picked up Think and Grow Rich set the intention to find and implement at least 2 wealth building strategies or mindsets by the end of the month, and then they were filtering for those 2 opportunities to take action, the book would feel a little bit more applicable and less kind of like woo woo, right? And same with the negotiation example. Find and implement at least 2 strategies to improve my negotiation skills and practice them by the end of next week. Now, as I'm going through the book, maybe, and I'll throw one last reading strategy out there. Maybe as I'm going through the book, I find 20 or 30 potential strategies. That's too much. You can't take action on 20 or 30 things from the same book. So when I'm looking at my entire list of notes as they relate to my intention, I'm asking myself, what 20% of these notes, these potential actions, have the chance to create 80% of the difference? Because they're not all weighted equally. Some of these actions have a little bit more relation to your problem, and you can see yourself taking better action on them faster. And so I think it's important to narrow down your takeaways and just take action on the highest leveraged activities.
Yep, absolutely. You want to almost kind of reduce the amount of things that you're trying to take away in order to actually get the results that you want. So
Yes.
I like that. Definitely. That's some really good advice for, new readers or even experienced readers out there who might want to get a little bit more out of what they're reading. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned, authors a little bit and promoting their books and some of the strategies that the readers themselves can filter through. What are some good books through looking at their reviews, right? So you currently have a book that is coming out called Rise of the Reader. And if you guys are listening to this, make sure to go check that book out and get it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great information in there to help you improve your reading strategies. So if you don't mind taking us through kind of the journey of, from the perspective of an author, right? Because there's a lot of people out there, and this is becoming more and more of a popular strategy to market themselves and their businesses, which is book marketing, right? Writing a book to promote themselves and their brand. And I see a lot of people in my circle doing that as well. So if you don't mind taking us through kind of that journey of writing a book, and then also why it's important to promote yourself through being an author and writing books as well.
Yeah, so I'll start by talking about how I got into the space real quick because it highlights the pain that I think a lot of authors experience. As I started to build my social media community and post book reviews, authors started to reach out and say, "Hey, Nick, your audience looks like a great fit for my book. I'd love to pay you for a book review." So that was the first successful form of monetization within the business. We'd reach out to authors, they'd pay us for book reviews. We'd review their book for our audience of 18 to 34-year-old men, for the most part in the United States. They'd sell a bunch of books. And each and every time I would finish one of those engagements, I'd ask those authors, "Hey, is there anything else that I can help with related to book PR, book marketing, podcasting, social media content management, like you name it? I'll try it because I want to work in the space full time one day." This was still when Book Thinkers was a side hustle. So I've tried dozens and dozens of different strategies to create attention for books. Most of them have failed, but we found a few things that have worked really well. Now Book Thinkers has 10 people on our team. We work with hundreds of authors a year, so it's grown quite a bit because of the success that we found in solving our customers' problem. So the average author, they want to create the book to boost their own credibility, or maybe they want to create the book to create a positive impact on their target client or something like that. And in either one of those scenarios, I think the number one issue that people have is they don't have a pre-existing audience that's big enough or that knows enough about this book. And it's really important to generate pre-orders, to generate a bunch of hype in anticipation of your launch, so that the minute your book comes out, you're selling thousands of books and you can get to the top of those Amazon charts where Amazon will start to promote you instead of you paying to promote yourself. And so like, all the first clients that I had, they would be these super ultra successful people everywhere other than social media, right? So they'd be like a semi-retired business executive at a Fortune 500 company that's managed millions or billions of dollars worth of revenue, managed hundreds of people, and they have this really secret thing, this really secret sauce style thing they want to teach everybody else about management or leadership or sales. And so they write the book. Everybody tells them, "Hey, you have all this time now, write the book, share the book. Maybe you'll get speaking gigs, write the book." And the book comes out and nobody buys it. So I ended up working with all these people who kind of sat at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, they don't want to write the book to generate money. They already have enough food, water, shelter for the rest of their lives. but they don't have that impact piece, the fulfillment piece. They want to get out there and share this message. And so that's when we'd step in and say, hey, listen, a platform like Instagram has billions of monthly active users, literally billions. I don't care how niche your book is, your target customer exists on these social platforms. So let's go find them. And so that's kind of how book thinkers started to get a little bit of success, was this social media consulting, helping people who aren't very literate on social media get a good grasp of how to sell books on there. And so what's that journey look like for an author today? 6 months before a book comes out, if people engage with book thinkers, we're placing these authors on up to 100 podcasts to talk about their book. And then ideally, all of those podcasts go live within the first couple of weeks of their book launch. That's a lot of energy focused into a short period of time, generating attention from hundreds of different places within the United States, all these different random Amazon accounts buying books. That's a lot of attention that, again, you can't have unless you really game plan it with a few months before your book launch. Each one of these podcasts typically backlinks to the author's website or to the Amazon page in their social media. So that's all this additional SEO credibility. Now, the second service that Book Thinkers offers is short form video content creation. So 6 months before the author releases the book, we're going to fly out with the camera, with the equipment. We're going to script out 100 videos for them. And we're going to spend 1 to 2 days filming 100 shorts, reels, TikTok videos, so that the author can build an audience and have some viral moments in anticipation of their launch. With a bunch of those videos having a call to action at the end, please pre-order a copy of my book, link in the bio. The third thing that Book Thinkers does, and it's kind of the final of our 3 main services, is we'll post book reviews for that author. So we have an audience of about 150,000 on Instagram, and each and every day our audience expects a new book review, some other type of book related to personal development, business, philosophy, psychology that we can post about and share with them so that it can solve the problems they're facing. And so we try to get a couple of those posts out right before the book launches, maybe a couple more right after the book launch, generate, an additional 100,000 impressions or something like that across the post, or more if a post goes viral. That also helps with SEO too. So that's what my agency does. That's what we do with hundreds of authors a year, either a smaller version of what I just mentioned or the whole thing. And all of that together creates a lot more exposure and momentum around the book launch. Sorry, that
Yeah.
was so much information.
I think that was great information, because what people don't realize is what you just mentioned there, and that is you need to kind of have that platform ready, that audience that you're tapping into before you even launch your book, right? A lot of times people just write their books, or they just put out, even for like content, right? They just put out content, but they have no idea, even if it's like the best content that's out there, the best book ever written, if nobody knows about it, then it's not going to sell, right? There's no revenue coming in. There's no impact being made. So you have to be able to build that beforehand. So yeah, I think it's important. I think, it creates a lot of credibility. If you're a newer entrepreneur, and you have a lot of great tips to share to write a book and promote it for your own credibility and brand, but also, somebody who is kind of like at the latter end of their career, right? That want to make a bigger impact. So if you guys are, out there and writing books, or if you got a book out and it's not really selling, make sure to reach out to Nick and Book Thinkers, and they'll help you blow it up. So
Yeah, well, like you
yeah.
mentioned, it's not the best written books. It's the best selling books that end up in the
Mhm.
hands of the right person. And,
Yep.
we touched on it a little bit, but I started this company and I got into this space because books changed my life in every area of my life. I'm 29 years old. I enjoy the passage of time. I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, and I'm happy. And that happened in a very short period of time, right? Less than 10 years. These books can solve almost all of life's problems when you read and implement them properly. And so I do believe the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. And so, yeah, if you write a great book and it doesn't get out there, you're not making the impact that you could have if you properly marketed it, right?
Absolutely. I love that. The right book at the right time can absolutely change somebody's life, or at least the trajectory of somebody's life. So But
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the compound effect earlier. There's an example in that book where they say there's a plane flying from LA to New York City.
mm,
And if you just tip the nose of the plane by 1%, as that 1% compounds over the duration of that flight, it's going to end up 150 miles off course by the end of that flight. And so it's like, yeah, that trajectory, that's all we're looking for is a 1% shift. And then years later, your problem is solved and you're so much better off because of it.
yeah, I love that example because it's absolutely how our lives work, right? We don't
Yeah.
think of it that way. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people, and not to get into a whole different conversation here, but I think that's the reason why a lot of people end up, 10, 20, 30 years, down the road in their life and they're not where they want to be because they did not consciously shift their trajectory towards the goals that they want to have and the lifestyle that they want to have and the fulfillment that they're really looking for as well. So just one last thing, Nick. I think as far as this podcast goes, so your book, Rise of the Reader, what is it about? Why should we go check it out? Feel free to let us know everything that we need to know. Give us a little sneak peek behind the scenes of what we're gonna get out of this book.
Yeah, Kobe. Well, over the years of running my community, literally hundreds of individuals reached out in different ways saying something like, "Hey, Nick, you're making all these great book recommendations. It looks like some of them could even solve my problems, but I read them and I have a tough time translating that information I read into action and real behavior change results. What are you doing in your own life? Because it looks like it's working for you." And so I would answer them a voice note here, an email there, maybe even a quick Zoom call, shake hands with somebody at a conference or something. But I always walked away from those conversations feeling like I was underserving people because I had never, a couple of things. Number one, I knew I had more to offer than what I could share given the medium that I was sharing. But then number two, I knew I was doing more that I wasn't really conscious of. So what I decided to do was write a book on how to take better action from the books that we're reading. And step number one, I sort of had to observe my own behavior from a third party perspective. And I know that sounds kind of goofy, but I was like, what the heck am I doing? Because every one of these books that I read magically gets implemented into my life and things become better, yet that doesn't happen for other people. So I started to observe myself and I started to spend a lot of time thinking about my process instead of working in my process. And I started to document it and build this whole concept of Rise of the Reader. The subtitle is Strategies for Mastering Your Reading Habits and Applying, that's kind of the big word, applying what you learn. Because if you read a good book and you fail to take action, it's no different than watching Netflix or playing video games, right? It's just a form of entertainment at that point. It's only by taking action that things can change. We talked about Think and Grow Rich for a minute earlier. Napoleon Hill, not the best guy on the planet, but he has a quote that I love. He says, "Action is the real measure of intelligence." You have to take action. And I think that's what I'm trying to become maybe as I get into my 30s is like the action guy, helping people take better, more educated, predictable, positive action. So that's what the book's all about. I wish I had it when I was 20 and starting my reading journey because there's an opportunity cost to reading every book that you read if you don't have the proper tools. You're underserving yourself. So take a minute, go through my book. It's short, it's easy to read. Implement the strategies that I teach you and get more out of every book for the rest of your life. And I'll end on one thing, Kobe, which is that one of the first books I read was called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's by this palliative care nurse. Her name's Bronnie Ware. She'd work with people in the last couple of months, maybe the last couple of weeks of their lives. She spent a lot of time talking to them. She realized that most people talked about a lot of regret when they were on their deathbed. It's a very common subject for people. And it was super sad for her. That's why she decided to write the book and share with everybody these top 5 regrets. And the number one is that people live a life based on other people's expectations of them, right? Society's expectations instead of their own. So the other kind of message in my book is that you can design a life that's uniquely fulfilling to you. For instance, I wasn't a great employee, so I used books to create a business and a culture that serves me and my individual needs. It's possible, right? So live a life that's truly fulfilling to you. Design something that is unique to you. And you could do that by reading and implementing books, especially books written by and about people that you want to be like. And so that's kind of the reason that I wrote it. Kind of some of the expected outcomes. You'll get more from the other books you read, and you'll be inspired to take bigger, better action so that you don't end up on your deathbed regretting the fact that you didn't do more. And yeah, you'll enjoy the passage of time a little bit more too.
I love that. I love that you phrase it like that, enjoying the passage of time. And no, absolutely. I think the way that you've described how books can shape and change our lives is so important, right? We have to be able to design our lives, and we can do that by using books and applying the things that we're learning from them every single day. So that way we can, essentially going back all the way to what we're talking about in the beginning, reprogram ourselves so that we are living the life that we choose to live instead of the ones that are put onto us by other people and the people around us and society as a whole, if you want to think about it that way as well. So I love it.
Fact.
Definitely go check out Nick's book, Rise of the Reader. Nick, anything else as far as, our listeners, our viewers here that want to check you out? What's the best place to find you on either on social media, or what's the best place to get a copy of your book and continue following your journey?
I have a fun offer for everybody. One of my favorite things to do is play the role of a book matchmaker. So here's what I mean by that. If you have a problem that you're facing in your life, or you have a skill set that you want to improve, DM me at Book Thinkers. It's spelled just like it sounds, Book Thinkers on Instagram. That's our biggest community, our most lively community. Not only can you meet people in the comment section that are like-minded, and get inspired to take more action, but if you want to DM me, I will provide a custom book recommendation. So I can play that mentor role if you don't have somebody that knows you. I'll probably ask a few follow-up questions, try to understand your situation a little bit better. And the reason that I'm putting this out there to everybody is because it brings me energy. So I love doing it. I don't care if I have to do 100 every single day. Like, I just love it. And, make the world a better place one book at a time.
That's
Oh, and
awesome,
people
man.
can find the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever. Rise of the Reader.
Yep. I love it. We'll make sure to leave the links to that in the description down below as well. So that way it's easy for people to get to. But yeah, make sure to go check out Nick's book, Rise of the Reader, and go send a DM to him on Book Thinkers and Instagram. So that way you can get a personalized recommendation. And you never know if it's going to change your life. So Nick, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate your time. Any last pieces of advice or tips that you want to leave with us before we let you sign off?
We all think our problems are unique to us. Oh, there's no way a book can help me solve that problem. But the fact of the matter is, about 100 billion people have lived before us. 100 billion. And millions of those people have written books or had books written about them. And thousands of those people have probably gone through a very similar situation to the same one you're dealing with. So if you choose, and this is my message to everybody, if you choose not to spend an hour researching the right book to solve your problem, a couple hours reading it and $20 to purchase it, then you're choosing to live under your potential. Life doesn't have to be so hard. Other people have told us how to improve our lives, and we just need to follow the roadmap, the written words. That's all we've got to do. And life can be easy, and you can enjoy the passage of time. So go read something.
I love it. Thanks so much, Nick. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care.